Hello everyone, it's Adebusola. I want to welcome you back to this channel. A lot of times I've gotten messages, comments, especially in relation to accommodation, getting a house in Ireland, getting a place to stay, especially you have a contract with your employer, for example, or maybe you have a course, you got an offer of admission with a university or with a school that you want to do a course and you're looking at ways of getting accommodation in Ireland or getting a house in Ireland, this is going to be like a detailed tutorial on what you need to do exactly, what you need to find, the informations you need, who to reach out to, and how to do that correctly. By the time you use like all the information, advice in this tutorial, then it's going to increase your chances of getting a place to stay. At least you would have more information, you would have more awareness in terms of getting a place to stay. You can also use that knowledge to relocate to any other country, maybe in Europe, in outside your own environment. You can know what exactly to look for and how to do that correctly. This tutorial, it's on how to rent accommodation in Ireland, either as a student or a professional. You could be a doctor, you could be a nurse, you could be a healthcare assistant. This detailed tutorial is definitely for you. So we're going to talk about the best practices and the tips to getting a house in Ireland. I know once people arrive in the country, it's always a challenge. Getting a place to stay is one of the most difficult things ever, especially currently with the rate of things happening around. You want to first make sure that you have secured your stay, and you want to do that at an affordable rate, something you can afford and something that is not going to be an issue in future. Then you want to first consider the fact that staying in a short-term accommodation for a month or two might be wise. You want to give your time, you want to give yourself time to settle in, and especially to your new job, and to familiarize yourself with the local area, maybe for 6 months, and then you can now consider to see, oh, am I going to look for another place? Can I actually continue to afford this environment? Now, there are things you would need to consider when you want to rent a house in Ireland, or either it's a house or a flat or an apartment, whatever it is, either it's a shared accommodation. There are things that you need to consider. We're going to look at in details. First step as how much rent can you afford? How much can you actually afford? There's a lot of things to consider in that, which we're going to look at in details in this very tutorial. We're going to look at what you want exactly from your rented accommodation. What are the information you want to learn about? What are the things you want to see in the house? What are the things that you might think you might need to get yourself? And what are the information you might need to look for online? And even when looking at the pictures, when you see an advert on accommodation, what are the things that you actually want to see in that? Step three, we're going to look at where your preferred area is. Where is your preferred area exactly? I mean, where do you think you want to stay? Is it where your course is? Is it like a bus drive away? Is it a car drive away? Is it a cycle or a walking distance away? You want to consider that as well. We're going to also look at in this detailed tutorial how much does it actually cost to live in Ireland, especially we focus on specific areas as samples, and then we can do a cost comparison and see what we want to do in relation to that. And at the same time, we're going to look at how to prepare your documentation, your paperwork, the paperwork that you might actually need when trying to apply for an accommodation, and then how to do the property search correctly. We're going to look at that in this detailed tutorial. So I want you to actually relax and don't rush the video. Take your time. You could take a note to jot down some points if you think. You could pause the video in between just to get some points, and at least whatever you need to do to get the information you need, then you can do that. Then at the same time, we're going to look at property searching, as I've mentioned, short-term rentals in Ireland. We're going to look at long-term, and we're also going to look at shared rental accommodation as well. And then at the same time, we're also going to consider what to do exactly when you have found a place that you like. what are you going to do next? What's the step that you want to do? What's the step that you want to follow? Going to look at rental disputes, if any issues, who are you going to report to, and what is going to happen, and rental scams to watch out for, because it could actually happen. It happens everywhere, and you might want to watch out for that as well. And then other factors to consider, we're going to look at in this detailed tutorial: what to expect from Irish housing, and then how to set up utilities in Ireland. And we're going to also consider tips, general tips to increase your chances of getting a place to stay, and then to reduce your overall cost of living in Ireland. And then I'll just give you a practical demonstration. We might go on one site and actually see what to look for when trying to find a place. So, and then I'll show you a sample accommodation draft letter. No, I wouldn't say letter now, but maybe like a message, short message that you want to use. You would have that ready in place and just be pasting that when you see an advert that you want to. Now we're going to start one by one. We're going to start one by one in details, and actually see what we're going to do next. So, how much rent can you afford? Sorry, I think my screen is just um now, how much rent can you actually afford? First thing you want to know is that you would need to pay a deposit upfront, usually the equivalent of 1 month's rent. A significant number of employers in Ireland want a deposit. The deposit means that, for example, if your rent is 500 euros per month, I mean, the house you want to start, you rent, or the advert you're saying, and it's included in the description that deposit is required. That means 1 month deposit is required. That means you are going to pay exactly the same amount, exactly the same one equivalent of the 1 month's rent. So if it's 500 euros, you must have an additional 500 euros as deposit. So when you are paying to the landlord for the first month rent, you're going to be paying 1,000 euros times two. So rent plus deposit. When they issue a receipt, then another on the receipt is going to be stated that you have additional deposit paid and the value of that as well. That deposit is going to be kept by your landlord. So at the time, maybe after many months or after a few years, when you want to leave the house or when you want to leave the property, they're going to do an inspection and see if there are things that were actually maybe destroyed by chance or by mistake in the house, or any other thing that they will need to repair. If it's something under the landlord's cover, then the landlord will do it. If it's something that you did, maybe um, maybe something that got spoiled while you were in the house or something like that, and they would need to fix that before bringing another tenant in into that house, then you might lose part of your deposit. The deposit is like is for repairs and stuff like that. In case anything happens in the house, they would use that to fix it. I've seen sometimes people might lose half of their deposit, or you might be lucky and get everything back and get your deposit back in full. But definitely you would have to be leaving the house first. You must have followed all the requirements of the house, all the um, rules stated by the landlord before you can qualify to get your full deposit back. So that is one thing to consider. So if the house is 1,200 euros monthly, for example, and you've been asked to pay additional deposit, then you need to pay 2,400 euros as 1 month's rent. But it's not the rent only, so it's 1 month rent plus additional deposit, and that deposit is going to be paid back to you when you are leaving the house, maybe in another 1 year, maybe in another few months, or usually they may not necessarily have it. They may pay you back the deposit when another tenant resumes in the house after you have gone, and then they send it back to you. It might not be immediate, maybe on the day you're leaving or something like that. It usually could also take a few days, because they might want to use the next person's deposit to actually pay you back. So I want you to put that into consideration. Deposit. So if you're looking at getting a rent, if you're looking at how much you can afford, you also need to consider that, do you have the deposit for this? If it's a shared accommodation, sometimes they may not need deposit. It, it depends on the area, it depends on the type of property, or it depends on how expensive things in that are, or how expensive the utilities are. And yes, so if it's a shared accommodation, sometimes the deposits might not be included. But usually, if it's a flat, if it's a house, if it's an apartment, sometimes the deposit might be mandatory for you to pay upfront. Then usually the rent is paid on a monthly basis. You're going to be asked to pay your first month's rent upfront. So you make sure that you have enough cash available. So you want to make sure you have enough cash. Well, like I mentioned, we're going to look at the comparison of costs around various areas, and then you can decide from that. Usually, the rent in Ireland is paid before the month begins. Like if you want to rent the house for the month of January, you would have paid for that month at least latest by 31st December. So it's not at the end of the month like usually in low and middle income countries. Maybe you pay rent after the month is completed. No, you pay the rent before the month actually begins. So that is the way it's done. And utilities, well, on utilities, it is typically the tenant's responsibility to pay for utilities. And again, this would depend on the house. I'm going to show you what utilities I mean and what are the ranges of price that you can consider when paying for utilities. Sometimes cost of utilities like electricity, gas, and stuff might be included in the rent. So you want to look for that information as well on the advert. So when you see an advert that says bills included, so that means utilities have been included in that. When it says bills not included or excluding bills, that means aside the rent, you're going to have to pay additional costs for every utility in the house. That is just a clear understanding of that. So when you are looking to consider how much rent you can afford, then you will need to consider the fact three major things. Do you have the deposit? The deposit is only one of 10. It's only until you are leaving the house finally that you would have to either be refunded fully or in part, or no refund at all, depending on if everything is still intact by the time you are leaving. And you have the rent, and you have the extra fees for utilities if required. It could be covered in your bills. Most times, if you're living in an apartment house, it's always covered. But if you are renting a house or a flat, you might need to pay utilities separately. Now, another thing that you want to consider is the utilities that you can expect to pay in Ireland. Those utilities that you can expect to pay in Ireland. So, number one, electricity or gas. Utility, first of all, is proof of address. It's used for proof of address. Maybe your electricity bill, your gas bill, or both. Some providers, some electricity or gas providers, they cover both together. So in the house, sometimes you would need to know the kind of heating system that is in the house. Is it just electricity? Is it with gas? Sometimes some houses have electricity only, and the cooker in that house is electric cooker. So the cooker in the house is electric cooker, and sometimes some houses have the gas separately and they have electricity separately. So two bills will be separate. If you are running both from the same provider, then sometimes it's cheaper if you have electricity or gas both with the same company, because both are in your house. So I've seen that that could be more affordable um, as well. Then waste is another utility that you expect to pay in Ireland. Waste, because there are companies that would have to collect your waste. There's three types of waste, which I'm going to mention later on. I'm going to talk more about the utilities and what to expect and the utility provider for each. And then you can decide from that and know where exactly to go on their website and look for more information. So waste is another major thing that you need to consider, is an utility that you would be paying in the house. If it's bills included with your rent, you wouldn't need to pay that. So it's your landlord that would be paying that, or the agents in charge of the accommodation that would be paying that. Then another thing is, if you have a TV in the house, you will be paying annual TV license. It's a requirement according to Irish government. If you have a TV in the house, if you don't pay a TV license, you could be You could have a court case. You could be called to court. You could be charged to court. So it's a requirement that provided a TV is in your house, you need to pay the TV license. Unless you don't use a TV, and then, or maybe you just use laptops. Even if a TV is in the house and you are not using the TV, you still need to pay the annual TV license. As of today that I'm making this video, anyway. Then another thing is parking is another thing you will need to consider. If you plan, maybe you have a family, or you think, oh, your family will be joining you and you've got small kids, or you want to raise a family in Ireland, and you think, oh, definitely mobility would be something to consider, or you going to be having work with agency and your work would require flexibility, definitely you need and you need to purchase a car, then parking might be something you want to consider. When you're looking at an advert of an accommodation, when you see accommodation ranges, you want to see the content as well. Does it have free parking space? Some houses have free parking. You can just park outside. Some apartments as well, like some have group of houses, group of apartments in like an enclosed village or secure village or secured area, and all the parking inside are free. Meanwhile, some houses, some apartments could just be on the roads and they don't have parking space, and you would need to park in a public car park, or when you park on the road, it's at a fee for the government. In some counties, you can park on some parts of the road and it's completely free. But if you live in the capital like Dublin, then you would have to consider, is there going to be parking space? Even if you want to go and buy something in a shopping mall, or you are traveling, you want to leave your car at this train station or in their car park, or you want to leave this, or you want to quickly, you need to consider, is it government parking, or if they're parking free for, so if you have some places you would see the sign parking for 2 hours only, free for 2 hours. That is, if your car is going to stay there for another over 2 hours, then you would need to pay. You will need to pay and leave the ticket when you make the payment. Parking tickets stations are always positioned on the roadside or anywhere there's parking. And then when you pay that, get the tickets, you drop it on the dashboard of your car, close the door and lock it up, so that when they are doing their inspections, looking at your car, the cars on the parked, then they can see the ticket on your dashboard and they know that you followed that. So you have to make sure, sometimes some parkings are online, they just search for the code, they search for your number, your like registration plate number. When it brings up that you have the current, because some people buy monthly tickets, some buy annual tickets, some buy daily ticket and stuff like that. But definitely you should consider a house or an apartment or a flat that has free parking space if you are looking at saving costs in Ireland. Then insurance, wealth, anything that happens in the house, maybe anything is spoiled in the house, if it's something general that the landlord can fix, you would have to report to the landlord and the landlord will get it sorted. But if it's something that was destroyed by yourself, insurance is not covering that, you would have to replace that in the house or in the accommodation you are renting. So that's optional. Insurance is completely optional. Some people even want to get insurance for the things they have in the house in case it gets lost or anything. But usually it's always not needed. Then at the same time, you want to consider internet and phone costs, especially internet connectivity and phone costs. Um, it would be at a subscription and you will need to be renewing that monthly. You will need to be renewing that monthly. If you have if you have three family members in your house, you can just subscribe on one phone or one number, and everyone can tether that or use Wi-Fi and connect to yours to save cost. So you need to consider that if you want to be watching TV and having a subscription paid TV, it will be at a cost as well. You might need to consider that. Mobile phone is optional. Some people, you could have an additional phone in the house, or just use your mobile, which is okay. So expenses on the mobile phone to make calls, to buy cards, credit card cards, those are all optional and it depends on what you do every month. So you will need to put that into consideration as well. You will need to consider that.